Hello, everybody. Welcome to Do Space's Lunch and Learn this afternoon. My name is Kim. I'm going to be your moderator this afternoon. I am introducing Brennan Costello. He is from the Engler Enterprise Program, and they are doing a 5-part series with us for the next couple of Mondays. So today they are going to be, Brendan's going to be talking about how to find your business idea through that. If you would like to watch part 1, that will be on our Do Space YouTube channel. I think it's probably already up on our YouTube channel. So if you're interested in that, you can watch that there. This is going to be part 2 of, like I said, part 2 of our 5-part series. So after today, there'll be 3 more parts. Anyway, I'll let Brennan get started. Take it away.
Sounds great. Thank you, Kim. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Like Kim said, I am a member of the Engler program. We are an entrepreneurship program on East Campus at the University of Nebraska, but we have students from all over the place, and we're trying to do more and more to offer things to non-students and to grow Engler into a force for entrepreneurship in our state. So this is for anyone who maybe is a seasoned entrepreneur but's looking for new ways to come up with interesting business ideas, or somebody that's just starting that really wants to start something on their own, but they're kind of racking their heads on how do I get to that first business idea to figure that out. And so that's what we'll be talking about today. Real quick, at the university or at Engler, I have the chance to teach a couple different classes, and so this is right up my alley, but what we'll be talking about today about what I teach, and then my entrepreneurship background for even why I have the ability to teach this. Right out of college, I worked for a couple different startups. One was focused on cattle. I'm working with a local startup right now that's focused on a trucking technology. And then I've started a lot of little side hustle things on my own. And during college, I ran a photo booth company. I ran a t-shirt company. Right now, I make some prayer tools for kind of the target of some church groups. And so I just like to experiment with little stuff like this, but also I've had the opportunity to have some startup experience and being a part of some startup founding teams. So that's kind of the background that I come from. What I try to do, or what I try to think about my philosophy of teaching. I'm not an expert in any of this. I like to go and try to find out what are all the experts saying, and then package it in a way that's really, really simple and easy to understand. So that's my goal. When we look about how do we find our business ideas in general, there's lots of different ways to do this. This is what I found, some suggestions about how it has worked really well for our students. This isn't the only way or the best way necessarily. I think this is what I think is the most practical and quickest way to find some of these business ideas. So that's what we'll be going over today. If you have any questions or something's confusing as we go through this, please put in the chat, what that question is. And then I'll leave a little bit of time at the end for questions as well. Kim, we're done at 1, correct? I think we're done at 1.
Yes, we are.
Okay,
yes.
Sounds great. So I will talk for about 45 minutes, and then we'll leave a little bit of time for some Q&A at the end as we kind of dig into those different questions as well. All right, so let's get started. First thing I want to talk about, and this is a little bit of a touch from last session. The last session was all about the entrepreneur's mindset. And I push back a little bit against this word entrepreneur. And what I like to say is enough with entrepreneurs, because a lot of times when you think about entrepreneurs in today's culture or society, we think about entrepreneur as someone who has to be like Mark Zuckerberg, or has to be like Jeff Bezos, or has to, be this like kind of rock starry, talking all these buzzwords. I mean, entrepreneurs sometimes I think sounds like a members only club, where you have to have been born a certain way, or you have to be 20 years old and trying to build a new software company to be an entrepreneur. I don't think that's really the case. I think there's a new reality for starting enterprises that exists now. A long time ago, the cost of doing business or starting something new is really, really high. I mean, even a few years ago, the cost of business of getting something started was in the thousands of dollars. Right now, you can get something started for almost nothing. I run a class called the $50 Startup Venture, and we give student teams $50. and they have to start some sort of business. And nearly all of them turn that $50 into more money. And some of them end up making thousands of dollars just because they needed a push to get some sort of enterprise started. So entrepreneurship is available to everyone today. So wherever you're at, whatever situation you find yourself in, what we believe at Engler is that entrepreneurship should be accessible to everyone. And a lot of it is the mindset and your willingness to just get started. You have the opportunity to build your own enterprise. So at Engler, instead of calling them entrepreneurs a lot of the times, we just call them starters. So if you're interested in starting something, don't feel like you have to have a certain something in your background. All you need is just the willingness to get started. Expanding on this a little bit is really what you need is the right frame of mind, the willingness to act, and that's about it. You don't need a whole ton of money. You don't need a bunch of time. You don't need a specialized education. You really don't need an office or employees or business partners really to get started, and you don't need a lot of experience. You just need the willingness to act and get something started. And today, what we'll talk about is, well, how do we do that with not knowing what I want to do, right? What do I even get started in? So today we're going to talk about what is that specific business idea and how do I find it? Any questions? Hope you're excited. All right, let's go. First thing I want you to think about, and you can think about this about yourself, is if you were going to start a business this week, how would you come up with your business idea? What would you do? How would you start thinking about, how do I find a business idea if you were going to start something this week? Think about it for a few seconds. And if you have any answers, please put that in the chat. Brandy says something I like or interested in doing. That's a great place to start. And we'll talk a little bit about a really easy way to get started with a business is picking something you already have a skill in and building yourself a job, essentially a business around that. I think that's a great answer. Something interested to do. Very good. Yeah, so I think like a lot of times we just start with kind of what we have, right? What's around me that I'm interested in? What could I, something I already do, how could I turn that into a business? I think that's a great place where a lot of people start. I think sometimes when we think about new business ideas, we also think that when an entrepreneur comes up with a business idea, it essentially is like, I have to think really hard and I'll have this bolt of inspiration that will come to me. I'll just be in the shower and all of a sudden this new unique business idea that's never been thought of before that will be super successful will come to me. And I don't think I think that's a very false way of thinking about business ideas. Julie actually says what our philosophy at the Engler program is find something that has a need, something that will solve a problem. And I really agree with that. And I have a video that I can't think shows this point of where do we need to start when we're thinking of business ideas. So pay attention to this video and think about how they're framing their product.
Like most women in commercials, I love to start each day doing yoga in my underwear.
Or journaling in my journaling nook.
And eating a wholesome, farm-fresh breakfast with a tiny spoon that I bought from a company that gives tiny spoons to underprivileged children.
Huh. According to science, most professional women don't have time for any of that.
Not that we need research to prove it, but there's research to prove it.
57% of us are up before the sun is up.
21% of us check our work email before even getting out of bed.
What?
Let's go get that morning meeting.
9% of women cite dry shampoo as one of the greatest inventions of the 20th century.
I'm done.
33% of us never make our bed. Like, ever.
21% of us have used an article of clothing to camouflage a stain.
Very nice.
Only 16% of women would describe their morning with the hashtag blessed. And that seems kind of high.
58% of women will swear at someone or something this morning. Oh,
You know what 100% of us do have time for? A real life Pinterest board?
Fermenting your own small batch kombucha?
Propose?
No, an organic breakfast in a bottle.
That's why we created Organic Balance.
Propose.
A nutritious organic breakfast with 16 grams of protein and half the day's calcium, so you can seize the cray. Find out what real women's mornings are really like at realmorningreport.com.
Great. So I love this commercial because it frames their product in not talking about their solution. They don't talk about how nutritious it is. They don't talk about just how convenient it is. What this company does is they paint the picture that this product solves a very specific problem for a very specific group of people, right? They don't just say it for everybody, but they say it for women in their mornings and the lack of time that they have, right, to take care of themselves. That's what they're hitting on, rather than talking about just all the benefits and features of their product. They're talking about the problem that their product solves. And that's the hypothesis.
Like most women in commercials,
that's the hypothesis that we have. Like our thesis in the Engler program is when we're trying to come up with business ideas, that the least risky way to jumpstart your business and the fastest way to product market fit is to solve a problem, a specific problem for a specific customer. And those last two are bolded for a very important reason, is we want to solve something specific for a specific group of people. So when we're starting, when we're trying to think of business ideas, the first thing we think of is not what's a cool idea or what's something that's would be fun to have a business. We start by identifying a specific group of people and specifically identifying what problems this group of people has. That's where you get started. What's the specific group of people and what problems do they have? And from that, we can find our business ideas. But we really have to focus in on those specific things. I want to expand this a little bit more. Let me skip ahead. I think that people don't just buy products. They're buying solutions to the problems that they have. Think about the last 10 things that you bought. Think about your past day or week or month and these purchases that you had. Why did you buy them? Did it help you solve a specific thing you had going on in your life? Some sort of specific need or problem that you had you were trying to solve? Or did you buy it just because you thought it was fun or interesting, right? I think there are some of those purchases that we think are fun or interesting or just kind of throwaway purchases. But I think a lot of the things that we buy and that we spend money on every month are things that are solving a problem that we have that we want to get out of our life. We want to make our life easier, right? So we buy solutions to those problems. Kind of like maybe I'll buy this breakfast drink because I have this problem of not having enough time in the morning. So that's what we're thinking about in the beginning of just like, how are these solving specific problems? Here's examples of 3 companies that were big, well-funded companies, but they all failed. And I think they all failed because they lacked a problem that they were solving. They all had really interesting solutions. So the first one is a company called Lytro. This was a Silicon Valley company. What that is right here, the square box, that is a new type of camera. It was a super futuristic, really technology-focused camera the goal was for professional photographers. They received $275 million in startup finance, and they failed. And they said the reason they failed is that they created a product that, even though it had a lot of interesting technology, the current professional photographers didn't care about it. They maybe thought it was cool, but it didn't solve a specific problem for them. The second is a device called iSmell. And this actually received tons of millions of dollars of funding. And what it did is it allowed you to smell the internet. So you go to a new web page, and if that web page was connected to iSmell, a different type of scent would come out of that. Interesting, right? Nobody really has this issue. And so even though it raised a lot of money, it ended up failing. And the last one is a gentleman who built these ostrich-like running legs. It was called the bionic boot. He worked on this for 30 years. For 30 years of his life, he was really interested in this concept of creating a device that helped you run like an ostrich. And he got lots of press. He traveled around the world for it, but it never really took off. He spent millions of dollars of his own money trying to create this thing, but he never created a market. It's cool, but it didn't really solve a problem for anyone. Maybe you could get something that was really trendy for a short amount of time, and there are businesses that are built around that, but it's really risky to do that. You could end up working on something really long and never really actually getting to the solution, or getting to a product market fit is what we like to call that. When the market fits your product and you can sell to a lot of different people. So that's what we mean when we say people buy solutions to their problems. They don't just buy products. So the least risky way for us to actually get to a sustainable business is to start by thinking about what problem do we know about that we can solve. And then in a moment, we'll jump to how do we come up with the business ideas from those problems. But let's take an opportunity to dig into what those problems are a little bit. So we'll do a really quick exercise that you can do for yourself. Let me skip ahead here a little bit. We need to put on our superpowered problem-solving goggles. And the reason I say this is that a lot of times we go about our day and we have inconveniences, we have frustrations, without realizing that when we do that, those are problems that we could build a business to solve. So when we put on our problem-solving goggles, it's like looking at these problems from a business aspect, not necessarily from just something that's in our life that may or may not be frustrating to us. So what I have is an exercise that I encourage you all to do with me. But what it does is it creates an opportunity to identify problems that you know really well, that you are accustomed to, that you can then build a business idea from. So we first start with identifying these specific problems. So this exercise is called Scratch Your Own Itch. And it has 3 different steps. Scratch your own itch. So if you got some paper or a Word document, open it up, and this exercise will start to help you figure out how do I find some of these problems that I could eventually turn into a business idea. So the first step in Scratch Your Own Itch is to write down what markets that you are a part of. When I say a market, that's essentially a group of people with similar buying behavior. So a customer segment is another way to put this. So here's some examples of some markets. College student, athlete, young professional, programmer, rock climber, personal chefs, rabbit showman, cat herder, whatever it would be. What are markets that you are a part of? So you would identify yourself as part of this market. So maybe it would be moms, or better yet, moms of young children, right? The more niche you can make it, the easier it is to eventually identify problems in those markets. Myself would be like a teacher, right? Or maybe more specifically, a collegiate teacher. Anytime you can group of people together with similar buying behavior, similar needs, that could be a segment. As you're doing this, you can also think about what are different interest areas. Like some of these, like rock climber, are there a group of people that might be similar in a different type of interest? So maybe, Husker football fan, like that would be an interest area. I've seen a lot that are like car restoration fans or golfers. Like those are all specific interests or hobbies that people have. That could be a market together. The one rule with scratching your own itch is to make sure that you're a part of the market. So I come from a small town and I worked for a farmer for a long time, but I'm not a farmer myself. So I wouldn't call farmers as part of my market that I'm a part of. I might be able to build a different type of business for them, but this is specifically for markets that you are a part of. So think a little bit about what markets that you're a part of. And I encourage at this step is try to make a list of 10 different markets that you're a part of. So you just kind of make a list down the side of a page of the different markets that you would identify yourself as. So just take a minute or two to do that. All right, so once you have some markets built out, the second step is to pick one market. So maybe circle the market that is the most interesting to you, or that you know the best. And this is where we write down what I call the jobs. And the jobs is essentially, as part of this market, what are you trying to do? What are the tasks that you're trying to accomplish? And you can keep this really, really simple. So for like college students, because normally when I do this workshop, it's for college students, some of the tasks that the market of college students might have to do is something like registering for classes, right? Or remembering to do homework, taking notes in class. Another market that I like to look at is someone who drinks loose leaf tea. So like I'm a tea drinker. I don't like the taste of coffee. So I'd identify this market of people who drink tea. Some of the tasks as part of that market are things like making tea in the morning, purchasing new tea, or new types of tea, or restocking tea, taking tea with me when I travel. Like all those just really simple things that you do as part of the market, as part of this market. Those are the jobs. Don't overthink this one. Just start making a list of like, hey, here's jobs that I have to do as part of this. What I encourage you to do though is be specific. Don't be too broad in what this job is. So like for college students, something that would be too specific would be like study, or not specific enough. It would be just like study. Like that's almost too broad. Let's get more specific, like study at night, study for an upcoming test, learn study skills, like all those things of like can be a little bit more specific than just like a big general one. So trying to be specific is helpful. So you pick out one market and try to make a list of 10 or 15 different jobs that you would do as part of the market. I'll give you just a minute to kind of make a list of those jobs. All right, and when you've got those 10, then we get a little bit even more narrowed down, and this is where we start to find those problems. So then, picking one of those jobs, ask yourself, what is frustrating about doing that task? Or another way to put it is, what are the pain points? Where are the problems that are associated with that specific task? So if my market was college students and the job was remembering to do homework, some frustrations would be like forgetting and then getting a 0, remembering a last minute and having to like scramble to finish it, just not having motivation to do it early. What I normally suggest is pick one task and try to get at least 5 frustrations as part of that. And the reason we ask for 5 is that's when you really start to think about unique and interesting problems, because it makes you really dig into it rather than just the first obvious problem. And so when we do this with students, we try to get to at least 5 on one task before we move to the next task. It's not helpful if you do this exercise and you just pick one problem per task, because then we never get any sort of depth and sort of to the really interesting niche problems that we could solve. And so pick a task and try to do 5. And then pick the next task and 5 more problems, and the next task and 5 more problems. And that's kind of the summation of scratch your own itch, which really is helpful about this. If you spend 30 minutes doing this, you'll identify a lot of markets where you can build a business around. And that's the specific customer part that we talked about. And then by going through jobs and then to problems, especially if you pick 10 jobs and 5 problems a job, really rapidly, you'll build this huge list of problems. So one market could potentially give you 50 different problems that you could look at. And that's really the goal, is when we get a higher amount of quantity of problems, we have a lot better options to come up with really interesting, different business ideas. All of a sudden your brain's going to turn on because you're going to see all these different problems areas that you could go down, rather than the other way of just like, what do I do? I'm just trying to think of a business idea out of thin air. So this is a really kind of mechanical way to go through and dig into solving those specific problems. So that's the exercise of scratch your own itch, which I think is really helpful to starting to generate a lot of those different problems that you can solve and that we can turn into business ideas. Before I move on, and you can put these in the chat or the question and answer, are there any questions around looking for problems and how to do the scratch your own itch exercise? All right, I don't see any, but we'll move on. And if you have one, feel free to put that in the chat or the question and answer area. All right, now that we've identified problems, let's get to the fun part, which is actually turning these problems into a specific business idea. And so we'll skip ahead to this. So I think sometimes when we get done or we think about coming up with business ideas, we try to make it really complicated like this, right? Like, what do we actually, what do we do now that we have all these problems? Well, it's really simple. It's a really easy formula for coming up with a business idea. We just take the problem and we figure out how do we turn that into a business idea? What business idea would actually solve and be a solution to that problem? And this is where I really have to work with students a lot, is to help them figure out this. There's lots of ideas or lots of ways that you could solve a specific problem. But what we want to do is we want to build a sustainable business that will solve that problem. We want to build a solution, but that solution needs to be a business that is sustainable enough to then solve that problem. Meaning there might be some free ways to solve problems. There might be some really hard ways to solve that problem. But the one that we're looking for is the one that we can build a business around specifically, which is a little bit different frame of looking at problems. The reason I really like teaching entrepreneurship and my favorite part of helping people get something started is I believe that a business is the best way to solve some of the problems that we have in the world, because businesses have to be sustainable. They have to generate, consistent revenue. And if they don't, they go away, right? So when we think about businesses, they're built to be sustainable. They're built to be long-term. And when we build businesses to solve problems, all of a sudden we start solving problems in a really sustainable long-term way. It's not like a government program which only operates as long as the government's still handing out money. It's a business that has to operate on its own and solving really interesting problems in a very sustainable, powerful way. So I love the power of entrepreneurship to solve problems that we have every day. So if there's a big problem out in your community or in your life that you'd love to be solved, think about how could a business provide that solution? Because I think it's a really sustainable way to solve problems that we have in our society. So that was a small side. So let's move forward. And now that we have this big list of problems, how do we turn them into business ideas? One way that I think is the most effective way, and this is not rocket science, and I'm sure many of you heard this before, is just to brainstorm it. So I want to dig in just a little bit to brainstorming, because there's a really effective way to brainstorm that sets it apart from maybe brainstorming you've done in the past or other ways you've heard about brainstorming, that makes it really effective to come up with really interesting business ideas really quickly. So brainstorming is essentially just a group that's coming together and is trying to solve a problem together. But you have to set up a brainstorm correctly for it to really work. Real quick, the father of brainstorming is this guy named Alex Osborne. And in, I think, the 1920s, he ran a marketing group, and they were tasked with coming up with new marketing campaigns for businesses. But what he found is every time his team got together, they would try to brainstorm something, but they would stop as soon as they got the first idea. So they just come up with one idea and then be done. And he found that was not very effective. They were leaving what he thought was a lot of really good business ideas on the table. So he started to build these brainstorming groups and started to come up with rules about how to set up a kind of group thinking in a more effective way. And what he described brainstorming as was that in commando fashion, each stormer audaciously attacking the same objective, which I think is really cool. It was really exciting to think about. Brainstorming is a really active way for everyone to get together and try to solve this problem together. So that can be a really fun way to think about brainstorming. He also said, at any brainstorming table, the villainess is a gal named Prudence, meaning the one thing that you cannot have in a brainstorming session is someone saying that will never work, or someone saying that's dumb, or that's crazy. Anytime judgment enters a brainstorming session, you're going to kill the brainstorming session. So the first rule to think about when you get everyone together is you have to withhold judgment. Anything goes. It doesn't matter if that business idea would never work. It needs to get out there. Because the more ideas that we get out there and start knocking against each other, that's when we get to really interesting, different business ideas. And we'll make a big list of business ideas, and the ones that won't work will cross off. But our brains need the freedom just to start putting out ideas without judgment to make a brainstorming session really, really effective. So that's the key thing to remember about when you think about brainstorming, is you have to withhold judgment. So let me skip ahead to some of the rules. So when you think about brainstorming, the reason I'm harping on brainstorming is I think it's the most effective technique to come up with a big list of business ideas. And to encourage you to do this with some of your problems is put together a group and set up a brainstorming session to try to come up with a business idea that would solve that problem. More minds than yourself is more effective at coming up with these business ideas. But here's some quick rules that you can write down if you want to go and try this. The first is you need to get a team. So the sweet spot is about 5 people that you're working with together, and everyone's sitting or standing on the same level. And diversity of thought is even better. If you have people from different backgrounds, it's even better to think about that different diversity of thought. So get a group of people. Second is define the focus. And this is where it really helps that you've already done the work of finding those problems. So you need to pick a narrow focus. Pick one problem that you want to focus on solving together. Don't say, what's a business idea that would, make this better? Focus on a problem. And a great way to phrase it is, how might we blank? So with college students, it might be, how might we help college students remember to do their homework? And all of our answers need to be a business idea that would help them do that. And then we set a goal. The goal here is to go for quantity over quality. We want more ideas rather than trying to come up with the best idea. Well, our benchmark at Engler is 100 ideas per hour. So we number them down, we get a whiteboard, we try to come up with 100 business ideas to solve the problem of how might we help students remember to do their homework. And then you just start brainstorming together. Here's the rules to follow. Withhold judgment, we just talked about that one. We want wild ideas. And we encourage ideas that are out of the box, that don't make sense, because that puts our brain on a new plane. And thinking about this concept of building and jumping. So if somebody in my group says something and I have an idea that would make that a little bit better, I share that idea because we're building on them together. And then when we get stuck, we jump to a new area. So we're thinking about apps. We're building different types of apps that could help students. Then we get stuck, we kind of run out of ideas. And then we jump to, oh, what about if we do something in person? And we start building ideas there. That's kind of the pathway that we start with those different business ideas. So what I encourage you to do, the best way to come up with business ideas is to run a high-level brainstorm. Get people together, set a focus, and then set a goal. This is some of the funnest times, or the most fun times that we've had in Engler, is getting a group of unique students together and helping them think about how do we solve specific problems together. And some really interesting business ideas have come out of that. So that's one way to come up with business ideas. And I say this one first because I think it's one of the most effective ways to find and grow those business ideas. Here's a couple of different exercises that you can do beyond brainstorming that I think are also helpful for coming up with those business ideas. Let's go to rebuild a tired business. I also call this one remixing a product. So this is when you can identify an old traditional business and then rebuild it. And this might be building a new brand for them. It might be pivoting what the business model looks like. So here's an example of what I have, or of building rebuilding a tired business. So this is a tea box with a way that a lot of like tea, loose leaf tea, is generally advertised. You can think of something like this, or like Old English tea, Earl Grey tea. It has kind of a very traditional, outdated kind of way that they market. Siesta Tea is this company that looked at that and thought that they could remix that product. And so they created really bright colors. These are the two founders, and then created really unique types of tea. So they have berry rhubarb spritz, nutty almond cream, rhubois limon. I'm sure I'm not saying that right, but really tried to rebrand tea to really hit a millennial audience, and trying to bring this to a new market. So they really pivoted the business model and pivoted the branding that they did a part of that. And so that might be something, if you can identify a product that has some sort of issue or some sort of problem, and isn't hitting a certain market, you can remix it to hit a better one. Another example of this is a company called Hims. This is a men's health company. The founder of this noticed that men's health was kind of a subject that nobody really wanted to talk about. And a lot of times you had to, it was difficult to find or figure out. Men didn't want to ask questions about it. So they created an online company that answered a lot of the questions that men had about men's health. So they have a really healthy blog that has a lot of the answers that men are looking for. And then you can order any of the products to help with some of these health issues right from their website. So instead of having to go into the store, maybe you have to buy something that's embarrassing, or I have to buy something I don't really understand, and go right online, get the answers that I'm looking for, and then order it, and it comes right to my house. So same area, men's health, but really pivoting and remixing that product so that it really hit the need that these men had and solved a lot of problems along that value chain. So thinking about what's a product that you know well that maybe has some issues with it, is frustrating in some aspect of how you're buying or consuming this product, that you can remix and hit it a little bit differently. So that's called remixing the model. The last one I'll share is something that's called a skill inventory. And this is what some of you talked about at the beginning. For how do I find a business idea? Is doing an inventory specifically of the skills that you have. And then how can you turn those into some sort of business? And I think that's a great way to get started, especially if you're not really sure. Getting started with something you already know is really, really good. What I encourage you to think about, though, even more so, is how can you take something you're interested or something you know about and use it to solve a problem, rather than just being, another person that makes this and sells this on, Etsy or something like that. How could you use it, and maybe the business model looks a little bit different, to solve a very specific problem? The other thing to think about is, what is something you know how to do, or a process you understand, and you could sell that information. Another way of putting it is, how can you decode something that other people aren't sure of and sell that information? An example of it is the image you see on the screen, the Miracle Craigslist email template. What this actually was is this guy named Sam Parr had moved to San Francisco, and this was kind of at the beginning of the technology boom there. And what he found is that it's very expensive to live in San Francisco, and every year, thousands and thousands of people are trying to move there. To move there, many times these are young people that don't have the ability to buy their own place or to rent a whole place to themselves, so they need roommates. So anytime somebody had an open room, they posted on Craigslist, and they would get thousands or hundreds of inquiries wanting to rent out that room. So people could be doing this for a long time and they never get emailed back when they're just trying to find a room. Sam actually decoded what's the best way to make sure that you're the one that gets the reply and you're the one that actually gets the opportunity to rent that room. How do you set yourself apart when you're replying to those Craigslist ads? What do you need to put in those emails to make sure that you are set apart and you're outpacing the competition? So he created a document and included the scripts on what to do, and then sold it. And so this template, this email guide on how to make sure that you're the one that gets that room, he put it up on this website called Gumroad, G-U-M Road, and it's just a 12-page guide on how to do this. And he just did some affiliate marketing with some blogs, and he made, I think, $30,000 just selling this guide for, I think, $30 a pop. So it's an easy way to get something started, to where if there's information that you understand, you can decode it and then sell it. All right. So those are some of the ways to turn those problems, specifically that you have, into interesting business ideas. I want to say list one more thing before we kind of open up to questions. So after you have some business ideas, what do we do now? Well, one thing I like to say that I think is really important is that no one is going to steal your silly idea. A lot of times our students or new starters are really worried that they can't share their idea because someone's going to steal it. And I think that's the wrong attitude to go into it. Find good people that want to help you. And the best way for them to help you is to understand what you're trying to build, and then they'll offer advice. The example I use with this is maybe you have an uncle who came up with the idea for Google. Maybe at the family holiday, he said, Uber. Well, I had that idea a long time ago. That's great, Uncle John, but you didn't do anything about it. The quote that I like to really share, I'll come back to that one, but ideas are worthless. Execution is everything. Everything in a business is about you actually executing it. So please share your ideas with other people, because then it really helps you get moving along quickly. And I'll go back to the ugly baby, is don't fall in love with your baby. The other thing to think about too is these new business ideas often change. It's rare that the first business idea that someone started out to build was the only business, never changed, right? And just became the perfect business. A lot of times starters and entrepreneurs, they start building something, and as they're building, things change and pivot. But it was the action of just getting something started that really got them to where they needed to go. So don't fall in love with what you have. It's going to change and look different. And that's the sign of a good entrepreneur, is they're willing to change and pivot their idea to really find that problem that's out there and really solve that uniquely for them. And let me skip ahead to just the very end. The last suggestions is try things. The key to really winning when you're starting something is to not spend money and try really, really quickly to do different things, and then to keep learning. So I'm glad that you're part of this and you're going to continue to learn. Here's a couple books and resources that I think are really useful. Side Hustle by Chris Guillebeau is a great book that goes through zero to income in like 27 days. So it's got really step-by-step, like here's how to get something started. The All-In Startup by Diana Kander is really good if you're trying to do something that's a new concept that hasn't been really seen before. That book goes through how to test it out really specifically. And The Hustle is an online newsletter that looks for new business opportunities and provides those opportunities. So if you're, not sure about this whole problem thing, but you're looking for other ways to find business ideas, The Hustle is a weekly or a daily newsletter that I think is really, really helpful to understand what's going on in the business world and looking for those different opportunities. All right, I'm a little over time. We have about 12 minutes left for some questions that I would love to answer. But I hope you found that useful, and really hope that you look for those problems first, and that will lead to how you find your business ideas specifically. So I'll stop. Please, if you have any questions, please put those in the question and answer section or in the chat. I don't care, but I would love to answer any questions if anybody has anything. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Julie. Alrighty, last call for questions. Great. Well, I will put my Janet, I think I have an idea, and now I'm wondering what's next. Good question. I would definitely encourage you to tune in next week when Dave Lamb, our other professor in this program, will be covering that. Like, how do you take the first steps? His presentation is going to be all about, like, how do I get started once I have this business idea? What are the good ways to do that? To answer that very quickly, I would encourage you to test it. Go in with a testing attitude. What's a way that you could test out your concept without spending any money? And it could be creating a flyer for it, creating a free website and sending it out to people to see what they think. If it's a physical product, then drawing a picture of it. That's literally how our students do, is draw a picture of it and go talk to your customer about it. Because if it really solves an important problem, that customer will be okay with a drawing of it and we'll be able to provide feedback really quickly if it's real or not. The worst thing to do if you have a business idea is to immediately start spending money without testing it with customers. So think about how can you take your idea in service, same thing too. Like, how could you do it as writing down what that service is, maybe on a flyer or something like that, and taking it to potential customers and see what they think. Even putting the price on there for what that service might be, and see, you know, what their feedback is to that price. The other thing to think about for a service is, can you do that service without spending much money, right? Is there like a way to do like what we call like a concierge service? So like if your service idea is some sort of, I don't know, digital product or doing something for someone, how can you figure out how to do it hands-on first? Like thinking about what are ways to really test this concept out without spending money, and making sure that I'm talking tons of customers before I really jump off and really start to grow it, is what I really encourage you to do and to think about. And that book, The All-In Startup by Diana Kander, is a great book that kind of walks through a story about how to test something before you spend a lot of money on that. Because that's what we try to do in the Engler program is, hey, test things. And that way you'll build something you know will be successful because you've talked to so many customers before you actually start spending money and taking out things for that. Vera, for how to get part 1, I think Kim said it will be up on their the Do Space YouTube page.
Yes, I will actually put that link right now. Let me get that to you really quickly. Okay, yes. So for part 1, here's the link to the video to our part 1 of this Engler Entrepreneur Program. So if you guys are interested in watching that, that is where it's at. And this one will also be posted on our YouTube channel, probably either later this week or early next week. It sometimes takes about 5 to 7 days, depending on how busy we are here at Do Space, to get them up on our YouTube channel.
Great. And Janet, yeah, I definitely come next week and listen to what Dave has to say about thinking about how to take those next steps, because that'll be a great presentation as well.
And also, Janet, we have until, we have this time allotted until 1 o'clock. So I think Brennan was here till 1 o'clock. So if you have a few more questions you would like to ask him, I would say go ahead if you'd like to. If that's okay with you, Brennan.
Yeah. So Janet, I think I see you've tried the service to clients and you think you're good at it, but stuck to like what's next or what to do next. Okay. Yeah, I think that might be like specifically, maybe we need to dig into your business a little bit to understand kind of what it is. And if you've tried it and it's gone well and they're paying you well for it, then it's figuring out how can you get started without spending much money, and thinking about what's the most important thing for you to get started to start generating cash flow. And it's thinking about how how can you start to take on clients quickly? So the example is like, hey, if you are trying to open a car mechanic shop, can you work on things in your own garage after work if you have a current job, just to get your base started up? Well, we encourage you to students to think about when they have a current job, or if we're working with someone who has a current job, figure out how you can moonlight this thing, moonlight whatever your service is, until you feel like you can build up a big enough base to take your jump and to actually go into it full. A lot of times people think about entrepreneurs that they're really risky, and you have to be super risky if you're an entrepreneur. But I think what entrepreneurs really do is they take calculated bets. So instead of just kind of throwing it all on black and seeing how it goes, they calculate what's the smallest bet that I can make that will move me in the right direction. So is it, asking my boss if I can work for 4 days a week, or taking vacation days to really start building up some of those clients? What are ways I can take a little small bet to continue to move forward until I'm ready to switch over? So that switch over, or that actually like going all in on business, is actually not that hard, because it's just a series of small steps that you're taking forward. Once you have that business idea and you start to kind of test out what's next, it's a series of kind of small steps to keep moving in that direction until you're fully running it on your own, type of thing. That's what I think. Kind of continue to take those small steps, and then you just kind of figure out what's next. A lot of what we tell our students when they're like, I don't know what to do in this next business, it's like, well, keep taking this next small step that you need forward. And when you don't know how to do something, reach out to people. So find good people to reach out to, and Google is your friend. A lot of times when students are like, hey, I have a physical product and I need to find a manufacturer, help me find one. I'm like, well, have you Googled it? Because a lot of times Google will teach you everything you know if you just Google it enough, right? Like Google, sometimes to the students, I say the kind of crude phrase of just Google the crap out of it. Like, have you searched for manufacturers and tried to learn what the manufacturing process is on your own? If you really want to build something, just start researching it on your own until you get stuck or something's confusing. And then you reach out to people who can kind of help guide you through those next steps. And I'll put my email in the chat, and I'm happy to follow up with anyone if they have like a specific, need. But a lot of times my answer might be, well, like, what'd you learn on Google? And then what's confusing about that? And then we'll help you find somebody who can, help you figure out how to take that next step. But I think in summation, it's kind of like, if you have that business idea you want to pursue, test it out, try not to spend money, and then just start taking those little steps forward. That'll eventually turn into like this bigger thing that you're starting. It's not just one big jump into the abyss and now you're a business owner. A lot of times it's kind of a small step along the way up is what we suggest, because it's a calculated risk. And it's those are easier steps forward. But good question. I hope that goes well for you, Janet. All right. Any other questions before we wrap up? Alrighty, well, I want to thank everybody for participating today. I hope that it was valuable to you in some way. I really hope you take the next step forward. If you're interested in being a starter, it's not, we tell our students all the time, it's like, no one's going to give you permission. You just got to get started. And so I hope that some of these exercises help you think about how to identify business ideas. I hope you tune in next week to hear from Dave on some more information on how to start taking those first steps to turning it into something. I'm a big believer that everyone should try to build some sort of enterprise for themselves, because it creates a lot of freedom and it solves real problems. And so I definitely, I hope you hear me encouraging you, because we need more great people trying to build some really cool stuff. So thanks for participating and being a part of it today. Thanks for having me. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Brennan, for joining us today. That was very interesting and informational. Awesome. Yes, everybody, thank you so much for joining us for today's series, part 2 of part 5. And again, yeah, just like Brennan said, join us next week to hear on what to do for the next steps with your awesome ideas. So thank you guys for coming. I hope everybody has a great afternoon, and we'll see you next time. Have a good day.